Hey, what's up guys? Today I'll show you a horror comedy film, Cabin Fever, Part 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. One day, a hobo hunts in the woods for food. He catches one prey and he is going to eat it with his pet dog. However, when he gets back to his dog, he finds it lying on the floor. He tries to wake the dog up, but it doesn't respond. He notices that the dog isn't breathing and tries to pick him up. However, the body of the dog splits apart and blood squirts on his face. After that, we see a group of college students going on a trip after their semesters end. On their way to the camping trip in the mountains, we are introduced to two couples. One is Jeff and Marcy, and the other is Paul and Karen. The couples are with their stoner friend, Bert. They arrive at a convenience store. There, Paul approaches a kid and tries to shake hands with him. However, the kid suddenly bites him. Just then, the store owner stops the kid as he grabs him by the neck. The store owner tells him that he should wash his hands by the river or else he gets tetanus from the kid. Meanwhile, the others head inside the store to buy supplies. The clerk talks to them and learns that the group is renting a cabin for a week of their trip. After hearing this, the clerk warns them about not roaming too deep into the woods as there are many wild animals. After the group is done with their shopping, they prepare to leave. However, Bert gets caught by the store owner as he stole a snack bar. Fortunately, he was forgiven by the store owner and they continue to the cabin. At the cabin, the group unpacks and sets up their vacation plan. Just then, Jeff and Marcy begin a fast and furious hormone game in the bedroom, but they're interrupted when Paul barges into their room and they also catch Bert peeping on them. Paul apologizes and leaves while they drive away Bert. Then their vacation begins as they do several activities in the woods. Bert hunts squirrels with his BB gun. Jeff and Marcy have hormonal exchanges for consecutive days, while Karen takes pictures with Paul in the woods. When they are near the lake, Paul tries to confess to Karen, but fails awkwardly. Meanwhile, Bert is smoking near the campfire by the cabin. Just then, he hears a sound in the woods, so he follows it. He brings his BB gun, thinking it's a squirrel. However, as he shoots something in a ditch, he later realizes that he shot a person. He then goes to check and sees the hobo, who looks like he was skinned alive. The hobo asks for his help, but Bert avoids him. Then the hobo tries to grab Bert, forcing Bert to fire a warning shot. This causes the hobo to fall in the stinky ditch, and Bert leaves him there. Back at the campfire, Marcy and Jeff scold Bert for leaving the fire unattended and almost burning the area near the cabin. They ask him where he went, but Bert is nervous and says that he just shot squirrels. Moments after, the group comes around the campfire while Paul shares with them a horror story from Daniel's CC movie channel. After the horror story, Paul laughs, making the group think he was talking nonsense. Just then, as Paul stands up and looks behind him, he is surprised by a man with a dog. The man introduces himself as the solo camper, who is camping alone with his dog in a tent near them. Then he asks if he could join them in the campfire. The group welcomes him and asks if he wants to join them during their whole stay. The solo camper accepts and plans to get his stuff back to the cabin alone, and he offers them marijuana. Just then, rain starts pouring and they head back to the cabin, while the solo camper goes back to his tent. Inside the cabin, while the group is having a chat, they hear someone knock at the door. As they open the door, Bert realizes that it's the hobo, asking for help once again. They see the hobo looking worse this time as his skin starts rotting off his body. The hobo recognizes Bert and reveals to the group that Bert shot him earlier and left him in the smelly ditch. The group scolds Bert for his selfishness as he closes the door on the hobo. Bert also justifies it as necessary because he believes that the hobo has a contagious skin disease. After that, the hobo tries to hijack their car in return for their non-hospitality. So the group tries to call the cops, but there is no phone signal. Seeing no other choice, Jeff and the others are forced to attack the hobo. As they try to pull them out of the car, the hobo suddenly pukes blood all over the car. Then he exits the car and starts approaching the group while they hit him. Paul keeps hitting him with a bat, but the hobo dodges the attacks, making Paul damage the car. Bert tries to shoot the hobo, but misses and also damages the car. Then the hobo charges at the girls for hormones, but Paul uses a torch to set him on fire. This forces the hobo to run his smelly ass away into the woods. After that incident, the group sleeps for the night and plans to get help tomorrow. The next day, Jeff and Bert go out to look for a mechanic to fix their damaged car. Marcy also heads out to find help. Just then, we see the dead hobo floating in the river, while his body oozes out a strange substance. While Paul and Karen are at the cabin, Karen talks about her guilt in burning the hobo, so Paul tries to comfort her. Meanwhile, Jeff and Bert arrive at a barn, where they spot a woman angry at a fat pig, which she finds infected with some unknown disease. She rants that these pigs she slaughters are sick and she can't sell or eat them. While ranting, she wipes and touches her own dirty body with the blood of the sick pig. The two guys are disgusted by that, and they ask her if there is a nearby mechanic. So the woman guides them to make a phone call for a mechanic, and they explain how their car got damaged. The woman strangely recognizes the hobo they mentioned, and this makes the two guys worried since they have burned the hobo. They then decide to find the mechanic themselves to avoid suspicion from the woman. They leave the woman's house, but soon they panic as they feel like they are criminals. Meanwhile, across the lake near the cabin, Marcy finds a house and calls out for help. However, when she checks inside the house, she finds no one there. Just then, Jeff arrives and tells Marcy that they couldn't find anyone else, but he lies about meeting the woman who recognized the hobo. Back at the cabin, Paul is visited by a sheriff with a short mustache, nicknamed Sheriff Mustache, who is asking about the commotion last night. Paul explains to Sheriff Mustache that the dirty hobo had a hormone disease, and he tried to infect the ladies, so they have no choice but to defend their crystal clear bodies. He also shows Sheriff Mustache the car bloodied by the hobo's puke. However, Sheriff Mustache is not convinced at their snully bullshit and says that the incident will be reported to their station for further investigation. As Sheriff Mustache sees Karen, he starts building up his hormones and acting weird, telling Paul to invite him if there are any sexy parties scheduled in the deep frost. Meanwhile, Karen sleeps throughout the day while getting nightmares about her getting infected by the disease. After that, we see Bert and Paul wash the blood off their car, while Paul explains that Sheriff Mustache will bring a tow truck tomorrow. Paul and Bert are wary of Sheriff Mustache because of his hormone rage toward Karen, and they should be more cautious in acting romantically to Karen. However, their conversation is stopped when Paul notices the solo camper's dog approaching them. Luckily, Marcy scares its angry butt away with a BB gun. After the smelly dog leaves, Paul wonders why the solo camper let his angry dog run free. Back in the cabin, Jeff tells the group that the solo camper might be infected as he thinks the disease is spreading in the area. He also thinks that the dirty hobo must have spread it around for some reason. Because of this, Jeff suggests that they get out of this place as soon as possible. However, Karen insists that they should report this to the police because they might become suspects. Just then, Karen starts getting nauseous and goes to bed early. Then Bert suggested that he could make the car drivable enough to get help. After setting their plans for tomorrow, Jeff and Bert fix the car while the others rest in the cabin. Later that night, Paul sleeps beside Karen and tries to kick off an official hormone game. However, as he reaches for smelly privates, he sees that there is a strange liquid, which means Karen is already infected. He then starts disinfecting his hand and discovers that the other bathroom has traces of infected blood. After that, the others also discover Karen is infected, so they put her in a separate shed for quarantine. Realizing that they had the first infection in their group, they start inspecting each other's bodies for possible infections. After that, Paul looks around the other cabins for help, while the others observe Karen. Paul later finds a cabin where he sees a woman preparing her sexy body for his man. Just then, the man threatens Paul for peeping at his sleeping sexy. Paul tries to explain, but the man ignores him and prepares his shotgun. Failing to find help, Paul goes back to the cabin with the others. Shortly after, when the group is having a discussion, they hear the dog trying to break into Karen's shed. Fortunately, they quickly drive its angry butt away again with the BB gun. The next day, Paul checks on Karen and sees that her infection is becoming worse. Meanwhile, Bert is alone in his car and he starts vomiting blood, so he decides to hide it from the group. At Karen's shed, Paul and Marcy carry her over to the car to take her to town to get treated. However, she suddenly vomits blood, which sends some chilling hormones down the spines of Jeff and Bert. Bert suggests going into town just by himself and just bringing back the help. Paul and Jeff notice that Bert isn't looking good, and they start to suspect that he's infected. So Bert quickly decides to drive off, leaving the group behind for him to get treated and call for help. Back at the cabin, Jeff packs up a crate of beer and leaves the cabin in fear of getting infected. This leaves only Marcy and Paul to take care of Karen. Marcy gets sad because of this, and Paul tries to comfort her with his hormones. Shortly after, they move the conversation to the bed. However, Paul touches Marcy's back, showing that he wiped his hands on her with Karen's blood. After their hormone time in bed, Paul disinfects his cold dog, while Marcy sees the handprints on her back. Meanwhile, Bert arrives at the convenience store and asks for help. The store owner is aware of the spreading disease in their town, so he asks Bert to keep his distance. But the kid suddenly thinks of pancakes and bites Bert for sweet honey, possibly infecting herself too. After seeing this, the store owner decides to hunt Bert and his friends to prevent the spread of the unknown disease. While in the bath, Marcy cries after seeing that her back is starting to rot. The disease worsens as she sees that her skin is easily shaved off. She panics and suddenly hears gunshots. She runs outside to check, but she gets chased by the angry dog. She tries to outrun the dog, but gets caught and mauled by it. At the same time, while Paul is looking for Jeff, he eventually finds the reservoir. There, he spots the hobo's burnt corpse and tries to take a closer look at the dirty corpse. Suddenly, he falls into the reservoir and panics because he is in fear of infection. Just then, he realizes that the water supply is the cause of the infection spreading, but it's too late, for many of them have already taken the water. With this information, he runs back to the cabin. Meanwhile, Bert is being chased by the locals with guns. After his car breaks down, he runs on foot back to the cabin. As Paul comes back to the cabin, he sees Marcy's remaining limbs and finds Karen being eaten by the dog. The dog spots Paul and chases his butt in anger. Luckily, he manages to get his gun and kill the angry dog. After that, he checks on Karen, and to his shock, he finds her face completely rotting away and her skull is showing. Seeing that she can't be saved, Paul gives her a mercy shot. After a while, Bert arrives injured and warns Paul that the locals are hunting them. Just then, the locals arrive and start searching the area. As they check the cabin, Bert acts as bait and gets shot by one of the locals. As he dies, Paul uses this moment to attack the locals near the door. He hits the local that shot Bert and shoots the store owner in the guts. After that, Paul gets out and stabs a big local in the head with a screwdriver. After that, he finishes killing the store owner before he looks for Jeff. However, he only finds the solo camper, who became food for the beast inside the cave. Seeing that he can't find Jeff, he heads to Sheriff Mustache in a party and asks for his help. However, Sheriff Mustache gets an order to kill Paul on sight. The other tries to kill Paul, but Paul successfully defends himself. Paul then runs away and hitchhikes. Just then, he gets picked up by a truck driver, and he suddenly collapses. When he wakes up, he finds himself in a hospital. However, the staff thinks that his disease cannot be handled by them, so they plan to dispose of Paul. Paul tries to talk, but he can't speak properly and fails to warn them about the infected water supply. On the other side, Sheriff Mustache arrives at a creek and throws Paul there. The next day, Jeff returns to the cabin and sees his friends dead. He is ecstatic because he is the only survivor. However, Sheriff Mustache shoots him on sight and burns his body with the other infected people. The movie ends with the people taking the infected water supply for their drink, which will definitely spread the virus furthermore. This is Daniel's CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.